Have you ever gone into a support group looking for help and left feeling like you were the problem? Because that's what happened to me. And it wasn't about being wrong, it was about being talked over. So I want to talk about something that happened recently because I think a lot of parents, especially neurodivergent parents, will recognize this exact moment. Now, this isn't about drama. It's about how exhausting it is to constantly have to prove that you know what you're talking about, even in spaces that are supposed to be supportive. I've been doing a lot of research around PDA, Pathological Demand Avoidance, or Persistent Drive for Autonomy, or what many people now call a PDA profile. And just to be clear right off the bat, I know PDA is controversial. I know it's not in the DSM-5, and I know it's considered a profile and not a standalone diagnosis. I'm not new to this conversation. The reason I'm looking into it is because I'm starting to realize that my kid may fit a PDA profile. And if that's the case, understanding it better matters a lot. So while I was researching, I came across a course on PDA through Tony Attwood's website. And I mean, for those of you that know, Tony Attwood is one of the world's foremost experts on autism in girls. And so I thought, okay, this could actually help me understand my child better. And after all, isn't that what we all want? So I went into my SSAH Facebook support group and asked what I thought was a pretty reasonable question. And for those of you that don't know, the SSAH is a funding group that basically helps you out with expenses around respite or anything that your kid might need outside of therapy costs, and it's found in Ontario. I joined the group so I could get answers for the things that I could claim. So anyways, I went in there and I said, hey, does anyone know if a course like this might be covered under SSAH? Has anyone had experience with that? That's it. Not a debate, not a manifesto, just a practical funding question. And admin replies and says something along the lines of, yes, it might be covered if your child has an autism diagnosis, but just so you're aware, PDA is not in the DSM-5 and is not recognized as part of autism. It's considered a profile. Okay, of course that immediately made me pause because that's exactly how I had worded it. But, whatever. I responded politely and I said, yes, my daughter has an autism diagnosis. Yes, I'm aware PDA is considered a profile. And yes, I am also aware there's controversy and that more research is needed. Smiley face, because Facebook. Then she comes back and adds, almost as a side note, you'll find that a lot of clinicians focus on anxiety. When anxiety is managed, PDA traits often go away. Kids even lose ODD diagnoses once anxiety is treated. And in my head, I just went, for fuck's sake. Because my kid is 14. Do people really think anxiety was not the first thing we tried? Or the second? Or the 10th or the 20th, and that we're still constantly trying to manage anxiety? Come on. We've been trying to manage her anxiety for years. Finding clinicians who understand her profile has been a nightmare. Finding a doctor at all in Ontario has been hard. Getting funding has been a battle. They're practically non-existent. And getting her to even take anxiety medication has been a battle. Put your hand up if your kid palms medications too. My point is, nothing about this has been straightforward. Nothing about this has been just manage the anxiety and it all disappears. So, since I'm autistic myself and I tend to be blunt, I replied with something like, if only it were that straightforward. I'm glad that worked for you, but our experience has been much more complicated. Smiley face, again, because Facebook. Then she comes back again. Except now she's explaining that she runs a PDA group in the UK, that it's widely reported that anxiety management works. And at this point, I felt like I wasn't being heard. I felt like I was being talked over. I'm sure you all know the feeling. So I said something I stand by. It said, "You don't actually know anything about our experience, our diagnosis, our struggles, or what we've tried. What works for one family isn't automatically straightforward for another." And that's not an attack, that's reality. She replied with something like, "Sorry to bother you," still framing it like she was right. So I started to respond, to clarify, to soften, to explain that I wasn't trying to be harsh. And then everything went blank. And I kept trying. No screen. I'd been removed from the group. And here's the thing, I don't think for one second that this was about PDA. Likewise, I don't think it was about anxiety at all. I think that was about hierarchy, about who gets to be the expert, about who gets to speak, and about whose lived experience is considered valid. And as an autistic woman, as a neurodivergent parent, this happens all the time. Support spaces aren't supposed to replicate the same power dynamics we face everywhere else. They're not supposed to silence people who say, "Actually, it's not that simple for us." They're supposed to make room for nuance, for complexity, and for families who don't fit the neat narrative. So, no, anxiety management doesn't magically make PDA traits disappear for everyone. No, one framework doesn't work for every child. And no, questioning that doesn't mean you're uninformed or combative. Sometimes it just means you're tired and you've lived it. If this resonates, especially if you've ever felt shut down in a space that was supposed to support you, you're not alone. And if you're still here, still researching and still advocating, you're doing the work, even when the system and the spaces around it make it harder than it needs to be.